My father told me my wedding had to wait for Megan's engagement party. I whispered, "I understand," and hung up. 6 hours later, my mother screamed into my voicemail. My husband smirked and said, "They Googled me." My father said my wedding could wait for Megan's engagement party. I whispered, "I get it," and hung up. 6 hours later, my mother was screaming into my voicemail. My husband just looked at me, smiled without any real humor, and said, "They Googled me." My father's voice had been so casual that it took me a full 4 seconds to understand he was not asking me for a favor. He was dismantling my life. He was not yelling. He was not shaking with emotion. He sounded completely, almost pleasantly level, the way someone sounds when they ask you to reschedule a dentist appointment or move your car out of their driveway. "You need to postpone Emily," he said. "Just push it back a few months. Call the vendors. You're doing a small thing anyway." I was standing in the kitchen of the townhouse. Daniel and I shared, one hand wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone cold hours earlier, the other pressed flat against the marble counter because something in my legs had started to give way. Behind me, spread across the dining room table, was nearly a year's worth of decisions. Seating charts, ivory cardstock RSVPs, ribbon samples, a laminated vendor schedule I had revised 14 times and printed at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night because the colors on the first draft were slightly off. $50,000, 347 days of planning, 4 weeks until the wedding. "Megan is finally getting her moment," my father said. "You need to step aside." And then, because in my 28 years on Earth, he had never once been satisfied with merely hurting me when he could also threaten me, he added the part that turned the floor beneath my feet into water. "If you don't cancel," he said, dropping his voice into something quieter and venomous, "not a single member of this family will be at your little party. And I will make sure every relative we have knows exactly how selfish you're being. Do we understand each other? Your little party." I stood there, staring at nothing, and felt something leave my body. It was not dramatic. It was not a wave of tears or a scream tearing out of me. It was quieter than that. It felt like a pilot light going out. The small, stubborn flame of hope I had kept alive for 28 years, the one that whispered, "Maybe this time they will show up. Maybe this time you will be enough," simply extinguished itself without ceremony. "I get it," I said into the phone. It was not agreement. It was the sound of something inside me dying. I hung up and let the phone clatter onto the counter. Across the dining room, my fiancé, Daniel Whitmore, looked up from the reception table mock-up he had been carefully arranging. He was wearing a faded university t-shirt and gray sweatpants. He had a small tape measure in one hand, and his reading glasses were slightly crooked on his nose. He looked exactly the way he always presented himself to the world: quiet, gentle, profoundly unassuming. A man who happened to love me with a steadiness that, even after 3 years, still made me feel disoriented in the best possible way. He watched my face. Whatever he saw there made him set down the tape measure. "Emily," he said. Just my name. But his voice had changed registers entirely. I tried to answer and produced nothing. My throat had sealed itself shut. I shook my head, and then I noticed my hands from a distance, the way you notice weather through glass. They were trembling. I need to go back for a moment. I need to tell you who these people are, because without that, what happened next will not make sense. The magnitude of that night requires context, and context requires honesty about the family I came from. My parents are Richard and Helen Grayson. My father spent 30 years as a mid-level corporate administrator. He retired with a comfortable pension and an enormous sense of his own importance. My mother has not worked outside the home since 1991, and she has devoted the intervening decades to the full-time occupation of managing my sister's life and curating our family's social image. They live in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb that is technically upscale and functionally suffocating, and they have spent my entire existence treating me like a supporting character in a story that was always, exclusively, about Megan. My sister Megan is 30, 8 months older than me. Yes, you heard that correctly, Irish twins. It is a fact my mother has never once mentioned without making it sound like my existence was some sort of logistical inconvenience. Megan is beautiful in a way that photographs exceptionally well. She is charming in the specific, targeted way of people who have never needed to develop actual depth. She has a talent for manufacturing crises at precisely the moments when someone else's life requires attention. My parents rewarded that talent so thoroughly for 3 decades that I am not even sure she knows she does it anymore. My milestones did not exist in our family's vocabulary. I graduated summa cum laude. 5 minutes before the ceremony, my mother texted me to say they were not coming because Megan's college boyfriend of 3 months had broken up with her and she was too fragile to be left alone. I stood on that lawn in my cap and gown for 2 hours. I watched other families cry and take pictures. Then I drove myself to dinner at a restaurant near campus, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, ate it alone, and told myself it was fine. I told myself it was normal. I told myself every family had friction. I told myself that for 28 years. I told myself so many things. My promotions went unacknowledged. Megan's new haircuts were celebrated with champagne. My engagement? to a man they had met a dozen times and never once bothered to research, which will become very relevant, was met with a polite, distracted, "Oh, wonderful. When's the date?" My wedding planning, funded entirely and exclusively by me, without a single dollar from my parents, was treated like an amusing hobby I had developed. It was the kind of thing they acknowledged the way you acknowledge a neighbor's garden. Mildly, briefly, without real interest. But this wedding was mine. For 1 full year, it had been mine. I had guarded it fiercely, because I understood in some cellular, survival-level way that if I allowed them anywhere near the center of it, they would find a way to take it. I just did not anticipate they would try to take all of it. Megan's new boyfriend, Julian Ashford, had proposed. His family was prominent, old money adjacent. The Ashford name was attached to a mid-tier corporate law firm where Julian had recently made junior partner. He had secured a cancellation slot for an engagement party at the Grand Sterling Country Club, the most exclusive venue in the city. The only available date was the weekend of my wedding. My father, without a single second of hesitation, had called me to explain that this was simply the more important event and that I would be stepping aside. The audacity was so complete it almost looped back around into being funny. Almost. My phone lit up on the counter while I was still trying to form words. The family group chat. The notifications came so fast that they bled together, a continuous vibration against the marble. Mom, Emily, your father just told me you're being difficult. Stop being selfish. Dad, family comes before a party, Emily. Grow up. Megan, honestly, Em, stop acting like a victim. Julian's family is important. You and Daniel can get married in a courthouse whenever. This is about my future. Mom, we need you to confirm you are canceling by tonight, or we are pulling our support completely. I stared at the word support and felt a laugh claw its way up my throat, ugly and broken. Support. They had not contributed a single dime. Not to the venue deposit. Not to the catering contract. Not to the florist, the photographer, the string quartet, or the hotel block I had arranged for out-of-town guests. Nothing. Every dollar had come from my savings, built over 6 years of working 60-hour weeks at an architectural design firm where I had clawed my way from junior assistant to senior associate on the strength of pure, exhausting competence. Support. My thumbs hovered over the screen. 28 years of conditioning screamed at me to type an apology, to smooth it over, to find some middle path that would keep the peace, cost me everything, and call that love. Then a large, warm hand closed over mine. Daniel had crossed the room without me noticing. He stepped into my space gently and completely, and he took the phone from my fingers. He did not ask. He did not negotiate. His face had undergone a transformation I had only glimpsed twice in 3 years. The quiet man was entirely gone. In his place stood someone I can only describe as carved from something cold and immovable. Daniel, don't, I whispered. The fear was reflexive, 28 years deep. I don't want a war. I can't handle a war. Emily. His eyes found mine, and the steadiness in them stopped my spiral cold. Look at me. I did. They are done. He looked down at the screen. His thumbs moved. He was not typing a paragraph. He was not arguing their points or explaining mine. He typed one sentence from my account into the family group chat. Then he hit send. He turned the phone face up on the counter between us. I leaned forward and read what he had written. Before you keep insulting my wedding, maybe you should ask Daniel what his last name means. The chat went silent. Not paused. Not delayed. Silent. The machine gun barrage of messages stopped as if someone had cut power to the entire building. 1 minute passed. Then 2. The kitchen became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could hear Daniel breathing, slow and even, watching the phone with the patience of someone who already knows exactly how the next scene unfolds. Daniel, I said carefully. What did you just do? I introduced them to reality. He replied. His voice was very quiet. There was no warmth in it at all. 3 minutes after the message sent, my mother called. Not a text. FaceTime. Full video. Her contact photo, a professionally staged and heavily filtered portrait of her and Megan, flashed on the screen in frantic, strobe-like bursts. Daniel did not answer. He did not silence it. He just watched it ring with his arms folded across his chest. They Googled it, he said softly. I need to explain something about Daniel. When we met 3 years earlier at a charity gala, I was there representing my firm. He was there because his family's foundation had co-funded the event. He wore a 5-year-old Blazer and drove himself home in a Honda CR-V with 80,000 miles on it. He never mentioned his family. He talked about architecture. He talked about a documentary he had watched on urban planning in Singapore. He talked about the terrible canapés. He made me laugh harder than anyone had in years. And when he asked for my number, I was so disarmed by his complete normalcy that I almost missed it. I found out about his family 3 weeks into dating him, from a colleague who happened to see us at dinner. She pulled me aside afterward with the expression of someone delivering news they were not sure I could metabolize. Whitmore Enterprises. Real estate. Hospitality. Development. Multi-billion-dollar. Half the skyline of our city. including the Grand Sterling Country Club, which was owned and operated by Whitmore Hospitality. Daniel's father, Gerald Whitmore, was chairman of the board. Daniel was the sole heir. He drove a 5-year-old CRV because he genuinely did not care about demonstrating anything to anyone. It was one of approximately 40 things I loved about him. My parents had met him. They had eaten dinner with him. They had watched him at holidays and family gatherings for 3 years. And in 3 years, not one of them had ever bothered to type his name into a search engine, because to them, he was just Emily's boyfriend. And Emily's things were not worth investigating. Until now, the FaceTime call timed out and immediately redialed. Timed out. Redialed. I watched it cycle 3 times, the strobing light of my mother's contact photo, filling the dark kitchen with something that felt almost like a visual representation of panic. Then a voicemail notification appeared. Daniel tapped it and put it on speaker. My mother's voice came through the tiny speaker. And it was a voice I had never heard from her in 28 years. Gone was the cool, authoritative dismissal. Gone was the casual cruelty. What replaced it was raw, airless, barely contained terror. Emily, sweetie, pick up the phone. Your father phrased things so poorly. It was a joke, a silly misunderstanding. We love Daniel. Please, sweetie, Julian's father is here. We were just showing him the wedding plans. We need to talk about this right now. Please pick up. Daniel ended the playback. Julian's father saw the group chat, he said. His jaw was very tight. They were showing him my name, probably bragging that they had handled you. Then he recognized it. I pressed both hands against my mouth because I had just understood the full geometry of what had happened. Julian Ashford, Megan's fiancé, was a junior partner at a struggling mid-tier law firm that had been desperately pursuing a major retainer contract with Whitmore Enterprises for the better part of 6 months. It was, by every account, the contract that would transform the firm's profile entirely. Megan had mentioned it at every family dinner for half a year, barely concealing the implication that Julian's professional ascent was proof of her excellent judgment in men. Julian's father, senior partner, public face of the firm, the man whose handshake closed deals, had been sitting in my parents' living room, presumably being charmed and flattered and told what an important family they were, when my mother pulled up the group chat to show off how decisively they had handled the situation. And he had read the messages. He had read my father calling Daniel's wedding a little party. He had read my mother calling me selfish. He had read Megan saying Daniel and I could get married in a courthouse whenever. Then he had Googled the name Whitmore. And in the time it took my mother to register the color draining from his face, the entire architecture of their social ambitions began to crack. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it, said nothing, and slid it back. Are we going to call them back? I asked. No. He pulled me into his chest. His heartbeat was steady. Mine was not. We are going to make dinner, he said. We are going to eat, and we are going to let gravity do what gravity does. He was right. He was almost always right about things like this, which is one of the reasons I trusted him with my life. So we cooked pasta. We opened a bottle of Barolo that Daniel had been saving for a genuinely good occasion and decided that watching my family implode qualified. For 2 hours, my phone lit the dark kitchen in intermittent bursts. My mother, my father, Megan. Numbers I did not recognize. The family group chat resurrected itself with messages I could see only as previews and did not open. I imagined my mother screaming at my father. I imagined Megan calling Julian in tears. I imagined Julian's father stone-faced, already recalculating. I imagined the Grand Sterling Country Club's general manager pulling up the reservation under the name Grayson Ashford and making a phone call. At 9:14 p.m., tires screeched against the asphalt outside, then car doors. Multiple. Then footsteps running up the front walk, then pounding. Both fists, frantic, rattling the frosted glass of our front door, the sound echoing through the house like something breaking. Emily? Daniel? Open up, please. My father's voice was stripped entirely of its authority. What remained sounded like an animal that had just understood the dimensions of the trap it was in. I stood up from the sofa. My legs were unsteady. 28 years of conditioning fired inside me all at once. Open the door. Absorb it. Make peace. Apologize for existing. Daniel was already on his feet. He moved to the hallway with a deliberateness I had never seen in him before. Every step was measured, his broad shoulders squared. His posture transformed from the gentle man who measured table settings into something immovable. He looked at me over his shoulder. Stay close, he said. Not stay back. Stay close. He gripped the brass handle, unlatched the deadbolt, and pulled the door open. He did not step aside. He stood dead center in the frame, under the harsh yellow security light. My family looked like people who had been running in the wrong direction for a very long time and had just hit a wall. My mother's hair was disheveled. Her eyes were bloodshot and wide. Her chest heaved in shallow, panicked increments. My father stood beside her, wringing his hands, a sheen of perspiration catching the light despite the cold evening. And behind them, in a designer trench coat, stood Megan. The arrogance was gone entirely. She looked stripped, terrified, younger than she had looked in years. Daniel, oh thank goodness. My mother surged forward with her arms out, her face attempting to rearrange itself into warmth. Daniel took one half step backward. Just one. The controlled precision of it, the absolute refusal to receive her, stopped her mid-stride as cleanly as a wall. Her arms dropped. "Daniel, son," my father said, trying a different angle now. "Camaraderie. We are men here. We understand each other." Things got heated over the phone. You know how it is. Weddings are stressful. We came by to clear the air. A terrible, silly misunderstanding. "There is no misunderstanding, Richard." Daniel's voice was flat. He did not call him sir. He did not call him anything with warmth in it. "You called my fiancée. You told her to cancel a wedding she planned for a year. You threatened her. You called her selfish. You called our wedding a party." My father's throat worked. Now, families fight, and Megan's situation is complicated. Julian's father is a very traditional man. "You needed a scapegoat," I said. I was surprised by my own voice, by how level it sounded. I stepped out from behind Daniel's shoulder and into the light. I looked at my parents, and for the first time in 28 years, I did not feel the need to make myself smaller to accommodate what I saw on their faces. And what I saw was this. Two frightened, small people who had built their entire sense of importance on the scaffolding of other people's status, and who were now discovering that the scaffolding had belonged to someone else all along. "Emily, please." Megan pushed past our mother, and the mask was entirely off now. What remained was naked, genuine desperation, which was, in its own way, the most honest I had ever seen her. Julian's dad saw the texts. He knows what we said to Daniel. He's threatening to pull Julian from the contract talks. If the Whitmore contract falls through, his father is pulling him out of the firm. If the firm loses the contract, Julian's family is pulling out of the engagement. Her voice fractured. "The country club won't return my calls. You have to fix this. You have to call Daniel's dad and tell him it's fine. You have to." She was asking me to set myself on fire. One more time. The last time, I suspected. The last time she would ever have the standing to ask. I tilted my head and looked at my sister, and I felt something I had not expected. Not rage. Not grief. Clarity. The clean, cold clarity that arrives when you finally see the exact shape of a situation you have been misreading your entire life. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Megan," I said. I heard my father's exact cadence in my own voice, and I let it remain there because it was precise. "You're finally getting your moment. Emily, be reasonable." My mother's composure broke entirely. Tears spilled down her face. Her voice scaled upward into something that, a year earlier, would have sent me sprinting to fix whatever I had apparently broken. "We are your family." "No," I said. The word felt like setting down something very heavy. "You are people I used to know." I stepped back into the warmth of my house. Daniel looked at my father one final time. No words. Just a long, clear, entirely calm look that communicated everything that needed to be communicated. Then he reached forward and pushed the heavy oak door shut. The deadbolt engaged with a sound like a period at the end of a very long sentence. I stood in the hallway with my back against the door, and I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 28 years. Daniel's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and his expression shifted into something I can only describe as quiet awe. He held it up. An email from the general manager of the Grand Sterling Country Club, copied to Daniel and to Gerald Whitmore, chairman of the board. Subject line, cancellation and permanent blacklisting, Party of Grace and Ashford. I read it twice. Then I looked at Daniel. He looked back at me, and for the first time all evening, a small, genuine smile crossed his face. "Come on," he said, taking my hand. "The pasta's getting cold. I want to tell you about the wedding, because it deserves to exist in this story as its own full thing, not just as a backdrop to what came before it." We were married on a Saturday afternoon in late autumn, in the grand ballroom of the street, Regis, surrounded by cascading white orchids and the kind of candlelight that makes everything feel simultaneously intimate and enormous. The string quartet played a Debussy piece I had loved since university. My dress was a silk column with a small train. I had found it at a bridal boutique on a Tuesday morning 6 months earlier, tried it on alone in a dressing room while the consultant waited outside, and cried in it for approximately 4 minutes before buying it. After my family exited our lives, Daniel called his parents. I had been terrified of that conversation. Gerald and Catherine Whitmore existed in my mind as formidable, potentially terrifying corporate entities. What they turned out to be was two people in their 60s, sitting at their kitchen table on a Wednesday evening, listening to what had happened, asking me 3 thoughtful questions, and then quietly making room for me. Catherine said, "Well, we've always wanted a daughter." Gerald said, "Tell us what you need." And that was that. They quietly upgraded every detail. Not to show off, not to make a point. They did it because, as Catherine told me later, "You planned this for a year with love and care, and we simply wanted to match what you deserved." Every person in that room loved us. That was the thing. That was the entire thing. I had spent so long orbiting a family that treated love as leverage that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to stand in a room where the warmth was simply real. During our first dance, I rested my forehead against Daniel's shoulder and let myself be held by someone who had never, not once, asked me to be smaller. Are we the villains? I whispered. The question came from somewhere old inside me, from the 22-year-old standing alone on the graduation lawn, from the version of me who had spent years translating abandonment into excuses so it would hurt less. Did I ruin her life? Daniel stopped moving. He cupped my face. You didn't ruin anything, he said. You stepped out of the way, and they tripped over their own arrogance. Boundaries are not violence, Emily. They are survival. He pressed his lips to my forehead. You are safe now. I closed my eyes. I believed him. The honeymoon was Santorini. 12 days. A suite with a terrace overlooking the caldera, a blue so pure and constant that it started to feel like a physical presence. I powered my phone off the morning of the wedding and left it off. For the first time in my adult life, I existed entirely in the present tense. On day 3, I needed to check something about our return flights. I held the power button. The phone connected. A single voicemail notification appeared, bypassing my blocks. It had come from a number I did not recognize, probably a neighbor's phone or a hotel line. I tapped it. Megan's voice hit the Santorini air like something foreign and wrong, all that blue and warmth suddenly dissonant. But it was not the controlled, superior voice of the golden child. It was ragged, guttural. The sound of someone who had realized, too late, the full cost of a very bad bet. You did this, she screamed, the audio distorting. Julian left. He moved out. His family won't return our calls. You destroyed my future. You destroyed everything. You think you can just walk away and be happy? Just wait. Just wait until you see what Dad did to... The voicemail cut out. I sat on the terrace in the Aegean sun, the phone in my hand, and waited for the spike of fear, the adrenaline, the old reflex that would have sent me scrambling to call back, to fix it, to absorb whatever was coming. It did not come. I set the phone face down on the table. I picked up my coffee. The sea was there. The sun was there. Daniel was there, reading inside with his glasses on. In a few minutes, he would come out with more coffee, sit beside me, and say nothing for a while, which was one of my favorite things he did. I thought, whatever Dad did, it will keep. Then I thought, I am done being afraid of the next thing they do. I was right on both counts. 1 year later, I am sitting on the stone terrace of the house Daniel and I built in the hills north of the city. The autumn air carries wood smoke and pine. The blueprints for my new interior design firm, Emily Whitmore Designs, are spread across the wrought iron table. I am 3 months into a business built from my own expertise and Daniel's quiet, unwavering belief in me, and it is already more than I imagined. My phone screen illuminates silently beside the blueprints. A blocked voicemail. My mother. Over the past 12 months, I have learned through the occasional surfaced message and the careful secondhand accounts of a cousin who still speaks to me with genuine warmth, the precise contours of what happened to my family after September. Julian's father delivered his ultimatum the morning after the porch confrontation. Julian, to his credit or his self-preservation, I have never been sure which, chose the professional lifeline over the relationship. The engagement was suspended indefinitely. The Grand Sterling reservation was absorbed into the ether, along with thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits with other vendors. My parents, toxic by association, found themselves quietly disinvited from the social circles they had spent 30 years cultivating. My father, in a spectacular act of self-destruction that I still find difficult to fully comprehend, attempted to sue Whitmore Enterprises for defamation and breach of contract over the country club cancellation. Gerald Whitmore's internal legal team, a department that exists for exactly this kind of situation and is staffed by people who do not lose, buried him in retaliatory paperwork and countersuits for harassment so comprehensive that my parents very nearly had to mortgage their home just to afford the settlement negotiations. They paid. They signed. They went away. Megan is 30 years old, living in her childhood bedroom, single and quietly humiliated in every circle she once moved through. The blocked voicemail plays on low volume while I make a notation on the reception area layout. My mother's voice is unrecognizable from the woman who told me to step aside for her golden child. It is frail now. Pleading. Reduced. Emily, sweetie, please. It's been a year. We are family. We just want to see you. We miss you so much. And, well, your father heard about the winter gala, and we thought it would be a wonderful place to show everyone we are united again. I listen for a few seconds. I wait for the anger, the grief, the old phantom guilt that used to ambush me without warning in parking lots and shower stalls, the complicated, exhausting ache of loving people who could not love you back properly. What I feel instead is nothing. Not numbness. Nothing is different from numbness. Numbness is an absence with texture, a wound that has been managed. Nothing is simply what remains when something that never served you has finally, completely finished. I swipe the voicemail away before she finishes the sentence. The terrace door slides open. Daniel comes out in a thick knit sweater, carrying 2 mugs of Earl Grey. He sets one beside the blueprints, steps behind my chair, and presses a warm, unhurried kiss to the top of my head. His hands settle on my shoulders. Solid and easy. Everything okay? He asks. I lean my head back against him. The city stretches out below us in the late afternoon light, the glass and stone of it catching the sun. Somewhere down there in that skyline is the Grand Sterling Country Club, and my parents' suburb, and the law firm where Julian Ashford is probably still trying to rebuild what his family's arrogance cost him. And none of it has any power over me anymore. Perfect, I say. For 28 years, they told me I was the shadow, the afterthought, the one who waited in the wings so the real story could happen on stage. Here is what they never understood. Here is what narcissistic people never understand about the people they spend years diminishing. You cannot extinguish someone's light by refusing to look at it. You only make yourself blind. I pick up the pen. I write my own story without them in it. The tea is hot. The air smells like wood smoke. Daniel's hands are warm on my shoulders. My firm's blueprints are in front of me, and they are good, and they are mine. I am finally, completely, terrifyingly free, and they are still out there in the dark, knocking on a door that is never going to open again.